Hey guys, welcome back to Tactically Misguided. I'm your host, Pat. With me as always,
Lobo.
we got a special guest today on a return appearance, Marc Arrington.
Thanks for having me once again. You know,
Give him a little wave.
must have not done that bad.
So, before we kick things off, last time we had Marc on towards the end of it, or I think it was more like in the middle of it, kind of started talking a little bit about philosophy with Stoicism. He mentioned that he wanted to kind of do an episode on that, or he could do an episode on that. So here we are. This whole episode is going to be on Stoicism. Before we really get started, let's go ahead and roll the sponsorships for this episode. Savage Tacticians is a lifestyle apparel company that is 100% veteran owned and operated to the last detail. They have everything from gym shorts, jeans, tack pants to kick-ass designs for swim trunks that go matching with their Hawaiian shirts. But most notably for sure are their graphic tees. If you want some really well-fitting attire that looks badass as hell 100% of the time, then head over to savtac.com and check them out. Be sure to use our promo code TM10 to get 10% off your order and show some love to us as well as our friends over at Savage Tacticians.
Bulkhead Energy. Don't be a pussy. Bulkhead Energy is an energy drink that has nootropic properties to provide power, clarity, and mental acuity of a ninja with a flamethrower. We can roll the dice on gas station boner pills or a parachute pack job, but we shouldn't gamble on our energy drinks. Be the reason it takes multiple officers to arrest you. Piss off that liberal college professor. Run that belt until the barrel starts glowing on that machine gun, and show the world that drywall never stood a chance. No one gives a fuck about your shitty day. Down some Bulkhead Energy and get some.
Well, real quick, how you been, man? Like, I've been
Good,
seeing
busy. Yeah.
seeing all your posts on the social medias. You look like you've been a busy man. So
Yeah.
catch us up a little bit.
Yeah, I have, man. So I took over the Veterans Business Collective this year as their president. The founder of it, his name was Chase Roth.
Mm-hmm.
He, founded it about 3 years ago, stayed in it with 3 years. And then we've decided to kind of do what all other nonprofits do and what commands do as a whole is you kind of rotate out leadership, get new ideas in there, kind of involved everybody, and we've been running with that ever since. So I took over in December. Now it's February, so we're just continuously trying to expand the brand, increase membership, increase our tangible net benefit to our membership. And then I'm also the president of the Raider Realty Foundation, and we are actively fundraising still in order to be able to provide a house for a gold or white star family in this area. So been pretty busy, and also I'm a loan officer by trade now since I've gotten out, and I think 2024 is gonna be a lot better than 2023. So still being able to help anybody out get into a house that I possibly can, man. So things are good. I think it's gonna be a good, interesting year.
Helping me with that.
Yeah,
Hopefully this year.
yeah, definitely, man. Definitely.
Finally get my ducks in a row.
Yeah, man. But all is well in the world.
That's awesome. Like I said, I've been seeing your stuff. How did the shooting competition go? That's where we left off last time.
Yeah, shooting competition went well, man. I think we were able to raise like $6,500. A Raider actually won the Raider Edition P320 that we were actually
go figure.
giving out. Yeah, and
it's like you guys shoot or something.
Yeah, right. The competition though went really good, man. Marine won it again this year, and once again we were able to raise $6,500 for the nonprofit. We're going to keep doing it again this year. We're going to do it again in September, and we also are starting to incorporate another thing called the Raider Experience, which we plan on launching in October. And we're either going to be doing that in North Topsail or Surf City, but it's going to be on the beach, and it's going to be a kind of a assessment selection minus that we are opening up to the civilian population so they can kind of put on their BDUs. Put on their BDUs and, get their sand, get their sugar cookie on. And we're going to raise money for the nonprofit. All the funds are going to go to the nonprofit.
I'm going to be there for that.
Yeah, so it should be fun.
We'll bring some cameras and have that rolling too to see how sucky I am at that.
Should be some good shape.
I still got my camis.
Yeah, man. But other than that, just trying to keep the right foot forward. So
that's what you got to do, man.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be doing a lot with charity events this year too. That's at least the plan. I want to do at least 2 more. So hopefully we can maybe do like a collaboration thing with that and get something going. Synergy.
I'm just hearing that. What was that? Lean Sigma 6.
Yep.
Yeah.
Airspeed.
Turn towards him. You're getting out of the mic a little bit.
Oh.
Don't do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't. I want it to sound good.
Technical difficulties.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Lean Sigma 6. Did you ever take any of those?
Airspeed crap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
They had the
that,
belt system.
oh man, that came out when, it started coming out when I was an air winger.
Really?
So that's where it began because it's about production and it's about, efficiency. And they pretty much just ripped off what McDonald's did, right? I mean, that's really what they did. And, it's all about how do you, limit your processes to the point where you become as efficient as possible. So yeah, they have the belt system and everything else. So I'm familiar with it, but no, I didn't get super airspeed out, right?
That's about 90% of that stuff that I see Jocko peddling is basically the Lean Sigma 6 with like some portions of the Ranger handbook. Like a good chunk of that is also branding. Kind of weird.
Well, now that I've gotten into this world, you see how many things are actually marketing and how much we actually think something is true, and through truth is just really was marketing. You know what I mean? Like even look at the Christmas story and look at the Christmas story through a marketing perspective, and it is nothing but a marketing movie, right? It's all about brand placement. That's like what they talk about the whole time.
I wonder how many leg lamps were sold after that movie.
Oh,
came
a
out.
lot, but it's also like Ovaltine, for instance, and just the whole damn thing is just marketing. Red Ryder BB gun, right? You know what I mean? Like,
I had one
they
as a
were
kid. I
really
think
smart.
It was because of that movie.
It was because of that movie. So it's marketing. And it's interesting, too, about how much marketing kind of influences the way that we think about things and the things that we actually hold as truths, which is one of the good things that we can talk about when it comes to Stoicism as well, right? So how do you actually derive what is true and what is not true?
Very well. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. So I said it before we started rolling. These two and their books have way more of a vast knowledge on Stoicism than I do. I listen to a podcast for about 4 hours through the course of a week to kind of get my mindset into it. So what I gathered out of it, to kind of just kick it off to get the conversation started, right? So we'll start with the core values, Stoicism. Wisdom, courage, temperance, judgment, and living in accordance with nature, right? I also figured out that does not mean, going and wearing a leotard out in the woods and eating some berries. Maybe back in the old
Technically,
days,
that could be your nature, though, right? So
Yeah.
it depends on yourself and self-reflection, right?
And then, let's see, so Stoicism is one of the oldest philosophies that dates back to about 300 BC. Is that correct?
Yeah, about the time.
In short, Stoics believe in the practice of virtue is enough to achieve a well-lived life. The belief is that material things don't really matter as much. Your goal is not to be without emotion, but to control your emotions and maintain a demeanor in what would seem unreadable to others as you process your emotions to yourself. In a world where you have zero control, the one thing that you do have control of is yourself and your emotions, is basically at its core the beliefs of Stoicism. There is something else in there that later in the conversation I'm going to bring up that I found or two things that I found that was interesting with what I gathered from it. So let's go ahead and kick us off, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of got into Stoicism, as I was kind of transitioning out, you know what I mean? I feel like I probably always kind of incorporated some of it into my life because ultimately, anybody in the military, anybody that's, worth their salt for the most part, takes agency onto themselves of saying, hey, this is on me, right? Which is just leadership, right? Hey, the buck stops with me. That is like a stoic kind of like aspect of thinking. And that's one thing that I really appreciated when it came to Stoicism because it was ultimately up to you, right? It's your agency. It's your reason choice, as they say. And you have to kind of figure out what's the difference between, right and wrong. And which is in Stoicism, which is wisdom, right?
Yeah.
The ability to know the difference between what's right and what's wrong. And really, they break that down even further into, what is vice and what is virtue, right? So am I living, in vice, which is like a materialistic type of life, or I'm living a virtuous life, taking agency onto myself where I can still help others, right? So it's not a selfish practice whatsoever. And honestly, it's really very similar. It's a practice if you think about it like that, right? But yeah, it's something that I kind of picked up when I started transitioning out, and I've always seek knowledge, but there's just certain knowledge that kind of just resonates a little bit more than others. And this was just one of those philosophies that really did for me.
When I was looking into it, I mean, it's thinking back on my time when I was in and everything. That's at its not face value, but at its core, that's what it is. Like that's what the military is. You think back to the leaders that you had or how you were as a leader, and we all did elements of Stoicism without even realizing that's what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I gathered from it. I was like, I've kind of somewhat lived a materialistic life, you know.
Yeah,
And,
well,
you
I
know,
mean,
sometimes emotions fly too much, but
yeah.
you know, once you, I guess, start studying it and practicing it, then you learn to get a handle on that stuff, right?
Yeah, well, some of the misconception is that Stoics don't show emotion, right? But you do, right? Like Stoics love, you know what I mean? Like they still get angry to an extent. They will just not show anger because anger, as far as it's just not a good thing. Because once you give into anger, you give up your reasoned choice, right? Unless you understand that, hey, like I need to go rage monster real fast because it's fight or flight time to an extent, right? Their argument in that point would be more, effective if you didn't. But at the end of the day, if you freaking got shot 3 times, then it might be time to get, you know what I mean? It might be rage monster time until you get out of there, right? So, and it's a very practical philosophy, and it's hard. It's not an easy one, right? There's no like, well, I would have done that, but you did that. There's none of that, right? It's like I either did or I didn't do. And moreover, it's more of what I should do, right? So I think fundamentally the question that Stoicism asks you to ask yourself is, what should one do, right? Not what must one do, right? But at the same time, you have to understand that whatever you did is ultimately all you would have ever done. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can always self-reflect afterwards and be like, hey, next time, given the same scenario, I would have done something different. But that's the overall concept too of amor fati, right? So it's just love thy fate. Because at the end of the day, you had all of your training, all of your knowledge, and everything that you had at that point of contingency, and you did what you did, right? There's no going back on that. Like that happened because the past no longer exists. The future is unknown, and all you truly have is the present. And Stoicism would tell you to try to live in the present the most that you can. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can't reflect on the past. And Stoicism would say, hey, every night you should reflect on the day, right? Because it's the litmus test, right? So how do I know if I actually had an ROI on my investment, right? I have to look back and make sure that I actually had that return on investment, which is actually reflecting on that day, which is just a self-reflective philosophy, which is great, which I think a lot of people need. And the beautiful thing about it is there's no gatekeepers, man. You know what I mean? There's no gatekeepers, Epictetus isn't going to come back and point a finger at you and be like, hey, you've been living, vice in your life. You know what I mean? Let out vice in your life.
Vice.
Live more virtuous, right? But ultimately, right? Like we all know, like there's been weekends that we all had ragers, and damn well on Monday you were like, I gave in to vice a little bit this weekend. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, you live, you learn, you get better. But that's kind of one of those things, right? And then the wisdom of it is that you begin to be able to self-reflect enough so that you know if you're living with virtue or you're living with vice going forward.
Self-awareness is a big portion of that. There are millions of people that have no concept of Stoicism whatsoever. They basically exist in society, and they're not aware. They're unaware. They're hyper emotional, and how I found out about Stoicism. I went to a military boarding school, and we had to learn about objectivism. A big portion of that was Ayn Rand. So I kind of learned it in reverse. I learned about objectivism. You always kind of you want to know where things came from. Where did objectivism come from? How did this Russian lady who fled communism, who were the people that influenced her? And so you back that up, and a lot of the modern way of control and government, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, like our Constitution right there, big chunk of it was influenced by
that's what you put
more,
back there.
Yeah, more modern. It's like Where's Waldo? Last time it was a machine gun. Now it's a rifle. Now it's that.
Change the sentence.
But one of the things that interests me about that was when we're talking about law, how human beings govern themselves, and the Stoics that were behind that, and then modern Stoics. When I say modern, we're talking like 16 to 1800s, people that really, or before that influenced the people who founded this country. But for me, a lot of it is control. So being in law enforcement, I'm always struggling with, I see cops every day. I'm like, how could you do that? Like, how could you take that person's rights away? And they're either they understand what they're doing and they're doing what's right, and sometimes you don't like what you have to do because it's right or wrong. But at the same time, when you're looking at some of these people that are doing terrible things, wearing a badge, and it's because they're not self-aware. They don't have the spirit of the law. They don't understand stoicism. Somebody gave them a badge and a gun, and they're hyper emotional. And we've all seen videos like that of a police officer saying, "Fuck you, do what I tell you." And it's like, bro, that's not it. That's not it.
And then that just paints the agency and therefore
Well, a good chunk of our
cops in a whole is bad.
Absolutely, a good chunk of our assessment and selection. I don't know if did you ever do the cadre for that?
I mean, yeah.
You did. Yeah, you were the cadre, working with those psychs and understanding like clinical psychologists, adult education, but stoicism in and of itself. That blew my mind. I went there being like, hey, this is a good gig. I'm going to make some money. I'm going to help out the community I came from. And then talking to, I think a couple of them worked for the FBI. And we got to talking on the side. And I was sitting there, my eyes were wide open. And I'm like, bro, have I been a robot for like, and I had a little bit of understanding from high school, a little bit of, messing around with psychology. But these clinical psychologists, these people that understand human beings, and they're talking to me, and I'm just sitting there going like, holy shit, I've been unaware of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like a drone, the best way to describe it is a regular person in the Matrix.
Right.
You're not
Part of the
aware.
herd.
Yeah.
Part of the herd.
You're not
Yeah.
aware of
Just
it.
following
Yeah.
along, which obviously I've mentioned it before. I went to UNCW and I took a philosophy class,
Mhm.
just entry-level philosophy class when I was there. I don't remember them teaching anything about stoicism at all,
Yeah.
which kind of goes back to the shit we always say about school and like what's happening with universities, what's been happening with them.
Yeah. Well, I
But-
think Stoicism has a hard rap, right? And I think people are like, oh, well, you're just trying to be stoic or something because you're not giving in to my emotions. And then, like, I'm triggered now because of whatever
You're not
else.
accepting my
right?
anxiety.
But that's not what it's about whatsoever. And what they don't understand, too, is, hey, there was a doctor that said you have anxiety, just so you know, right? And that they come up with that. And then you latched onto it. And then you started making all these excuses about your own
Exactly.
internal
It
work.
became their personality.
It became you incorporated it now into your reasoned choice, which is to me just not right. And veterans do it all the time, right? Oh, I got PTSD, man. I'm triggered, blah, 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 right? At the end of the day, you just have a lack of wisdom because you aren't able to derive what's vice and what's virtue, right? Or what's inside your control and what's outside your control, which is just, it's a very simple way of thinking about things. But at the end of the day, as y'all know, like, the simplest plan that gets to the X wins. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You can have your old like weird, like, oh, I'm going to do this and all this shadow ops bullshit, right? But at the end of the day, like if I can punch you in the face faster than you can punch me in the face, guess what? I won. You know what I mean? Like,
There's also an issue with control of people. If you can keep somebody relatively unaware, they're easier to influence. You can control them. What I see now is people are like, oh, I have an education. Okay, you went to school and you paid a lot of money, but you're still not self-aware of what's going on. You're following basically a new religion. What's your Eucharist? It's to turn on to Twitter, put some hashtags in your bio, some pronouns, stuff like that. You're basically just doing what people tell you. And what weaponizes autonomy. We can talk about autonomy, to be an individual. Like, a lot of people don't really understand that. They say, yeah, I love freedom. I love this. I love that. They're very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, if everybody here like instantly learned a little bit about stoicism and self-reflection and values and vice, that would put a lot of people out of business, and it would also take away a lot of control. They like having, there are people out there that are very nefarious, and they're like, these people are ignorant. I am going to use that to control them.
correct. Absolutely. And the worst part is about that is they act like they're saving you from something. So Vladimir Lenin was one of the first ones that actually really incorporated that type of aspect into it, right? So he went to the working class. He said, look what the aristocracy is doing to you. You are strong. The aristocracy is holding you down. They're like, fuck yeah, the aristocracy is holding me down. Maybe we should just go murder them all, right? And then they had then when they had socialism come over, and guess who's rolling in a Rolls Royce now? Vladimir Lenin, right? You know what I mean? So
Stalin took over from him.
Stalin took over from him because what they do is they plant a seed inside their head and they say, that's your problem. And then people fixate on it and they focus on it and they gravitate to it. And then all of a sudden, now you're the problem solver.
Exactly.
Right? What is Stoicism would tell you is like, oh, cool. You have a problem. That seems like your problem. You can, I'll be open and listen to it. That's fine. But ultimately, the choice is mine. And you're not going to influence my reasoned choice because I understand what's virtuous and what's not virtuous. And I also understand what's inside my control and what's outside my control. And I would argue that if you actually self-reflect enough, you're actually going to have some critical thinking skills involved. And you're going to be like, hold on. So old boss like the new boss then, right? You know what I mean? So wait. So you want to take over the aristocracy, then replace them with yourself and stay in power until you die.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds like a what? Same. Right? Except for you don't have the divine right of kings like they used to have, right? You know, it's your blood's not better than mine. But now your argument is, you know what I mean? So it's like, and people love to give up agency so easily. And, you know, I see that you have the social contract over there. I understand that we have to have a social contract with our government. We have to have a social contract with our society because we live in a civilization now, right? So it's not like straight up hunter-gatherer anymore, right? It's not like, cool, like, you know, if your tribe doesn't get along with my tribe, then we can handle that. No, it's not the same anymore, right?
The monkey bars.
Yeah, but that social contract also has to deal with agency. And there's so much bullshit going on in our politics right now, too, that they are just taking away people's agency and they're not letting people think for themselves, because if you think for yourself, now you can be dangerous.
Yeah, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Now you can be dangerous, right? Conspiracy theorists are not, but ultimately if you're actually making your own reasoned choice and you're not letting somebody else just influence you and tell you what you want to hear, now you're actually a free agent. You can actually make your own decisions, and they can't orchestrate that, and they can't plan for that. Right.
I hate that.
Watching the Romans as a parallel civilization to ancient Greeks. Ancient Greeks pioneered Stoicism philosophy. What ultimately undid them was they gravitated too far and got rid of a warrior class. They also kind of started doing their own little cancerous mini democracies. And when larger powers came in, they wound up being able to turn different city-states against each other. But there's a book called The Way of Men. It's a phenomenal book. It's by a guy named Jack Donovan. He's got some really killer quotes in there, but it's about masculinity and how society basically grew. And he uses Rome for the most part. He uses Latin. He explains a lot of the tenets. But when the Romans showed up, the Romans had a pretty good go of things because of the way that their baseline fundamentals of governing. Now, was it virtuous? Absolutely not. There was terrible things involved with ancient Rome before they became an empire, and they stole so much from the Greeks. They co-opted it,
Yeah.
and that's what really led them to explode and become a very large empire. But as far as like the social contract and how Stoicism, it influenced a lot of the things we have. And we're kind of getting fucked over here because a lot of people in power are not Stoics anymore. They're very nefarious. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with corporations and making money and selling out. The idea
Big
behind
pharma.
Yeah, well, big pharma, the military-industrial complex. You look at, like, for instance, Nikki Haley right now. Well, we won't get into politics, but I have a very soft spot for Stoicism and psychology when it comes to how control works in groups and in groups. And if they can divide you and then they can subcategorize you. And it reminds me of with Joseph Stalin. Now he said, hey, these are the kulaks, the landowners. And then he went and he said, hey, these are the peasants. And he subdivided everybody else up. You look at India and how they have the caste system. It's just easy to control people. Mm-hmm. But we take away that monarchy, we take away that bloodline, and then we just superimpose a communist ideology on top of it. And next thing you know is millions of people are dead. It's crazy, and most people just go along with it.
Yep.
Most people just going
Same
living their
thing.
day, not even knowing what's going on half the time.
Yep. Well, they start, you have a charismatic leader that's able to influence them, and they give up their just reason choice, right? Which is reason choice, if you really think about it, is just we would call it critical thinking, right? That's what we would call it nowadays. And that is not really taught anymore. And what's really terrifying is like, I got a 6 and a 9-year-old who are going to schools, right? And they're already getting standardized tests in schools, which is terrifying at 6 and 9, right? I remember back when I did it, it was like you got a standardized test in 10th grade because you were either going to college or going to do something else. And that was the ASVAB, right? To see if you were actually capable of being in the military or not, you know what I mean? But now they start teaching them like literally, at kindergarten, you're just taking a standardized test now, right? Which is terrifying because now they just teach to the test. Whereas, a Stoic kind of concept would be like you learn to learn. You know what I mean? That is the, concept of excellence that Stoicism talks about. Isn't like you're not doing it just to achieve a goal. You're doing it to actually achieve the wisdom later on in life that you can then apply to your life and live a eudaimonic life, right? And ultimately, like we don't even know anymore what is actually truth and what is fucking lies, man, because it's so much information, and now they have all
information freaking.
Oh man, they got all the AI stuff, right? And ultimately, like
that scares the shit out of me.
And it's fucking kind of interesting if you think about it that it's 2024 right now, and we're looking back at something that started 2,000 years ago. And it's more prevalent, or should be more prevalent today than it ever has been. But, they would look at this as some sort of like, oh, that's just unemotional, blah, 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 or whatever else. But actually, it's just really self-reflective, and it actually incorporates a lot of critical thinking, which is very lacking.
Absolutely. One of the things that is one of the most treacherous things I've seen is they call it education. And it's turned into conditioning. It's
Absolutely.
You're not learning. And it's basically, when they did a study on kids to track if they were geniuses. And there were certain markers that basically said you're a genius if you're capable of thinking this way and doing these things. And they tracked these kids from when I think they were in kindergarten. And as they progressively got older in their education system, those markers kept dropping. So what would have been 40, 50 out of a group of 100 people dwindled down to 2. And it had to do with a lot of the conditioning within the system that they were learning. It basically says, if you aren't doing exactly what the system is telling you to do, there's a problem. It's ADHD or you're
snatch onto that
crazy stuff. And so when people say, "Oh, I got to send kids to school so that they can get an education," it's conditioning. That's all it is. And it worries me because who says what education is now? And you look at the people that are in charge of like the teachers unions, like read their bios, and you're just sitting there going like, I wouldn't want them in charge of me, let alone the development of our next generation. And they're not growing up in a world where they understand everybody else. That's one of the great things about America and why we're so powerful. So we were a nation of immigrants. We had a good understanding of everybody. You looked at the original CIA, and they had people from every walk of life, all these different ethnicities.
Exactly.
And, well, they had guys that understood the Greek communists. They had guys that understood different monarchies. They had people that were very intelligent, and they were basically geographically aligned, and they understood the innate nature of human beings to self-isolate and become different cultures and societies and religions. Now, like, if you're just a subpar human being, you can just walk in and they'll be like, okay, are you LGBT? Are you a woman? Are you this? And it's like a victim scale. There's no meritocracy.
Exactly, yep.
It has nothing to do with what's between your ears.
Victimology.
As long as you do the Eucharist along with whatever conditioning they're telling you, you can go far. I see it in policing all the time. If you're just a subpar person who goes along with what they're saying, you've got a job. And it's terrible because now we're giving those people fucking authority to take away your rights.
Exactly.
They have no concept of being an individual.
Yeah, and once again, like you're kind of talking about, what Stoicism say, we're all equal. There's nobody that's better than somebody else, right? There might be somebody that has more wisdom, you know what I mean? Maybe a little bit more just or temperate or something else like that. Maybe a little bit more courageous. But at the end of the day, like we are all fundamentally the same, right? Which is just should be based on your merit. But people don't like that. People don't like it. And that's what Stoicism tells you. Like, it's you, right? You have to self-reflect. You have to be able to establish your own merit, right? And see how, either virtuous or not virtuous you are. But people don't like that. People like a handicap, right? People want to be like, oh, no, well, if I was born into this or that or whatever else, I would have been fine. But, I had that going on.
If I wasn't born in a certain area.
Right. Which, as Epictetus, right? Dude was a slave, right? And then we're reading about Epictetus in 2024, right? 2,000 years later. And we're reading about what a person that was literally instructed by his master and became, essentially a philosopher that Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of Rome, studied. You know what I mean? So, like, that says something about his merit, right? But born into slavery, right? And then now we're reading about his knowledge and everything else today, which just goes to speak about humanity and how we are all the same, right? Like your intellect is just like the way you think is exactly the same way I can think, right? Just depends on how much willpower, right, that you actually put in.
The individual person is willing to do.
Yeah, your merit, right? But people don't like that. And they don't like it. And, like my kids, for instance, right, they read this book, which is, it's a very simple book. You read one passage a day. There's 366. It's just called the Daily Stoic. But my daughter, she's 9. She has to read that at the breakfast table every morning. And then we talk about it. And I make my 6-year-old kind of explain what it actually means and how he's actually going to apply it that day, right? And they actually have to do that. And, I'll hear them talking about it. It's like, hey, that's outside my control. It's like, absolutely. So why are you worried about it? You know what I mean? If it's outside your control, all you can worry about is how you think about it at that point, which is your reasoned choice. And people don't like that, right?
That's a good idea. I'm going to start doing that with
Oh,
Reagan.
it's
I'm start
great.
doing that with Reagan.
It's
I think she needs a little bit of that.
Well, it's great, and you can hold them accountable as well. You know what I mean? And you can actually have like a conversation because it's based off of logic, right? Logos, right? And that's what the entire philosophy is based off. Most philosophies in general are pretty logically based, right? They Stoicism and most other, especially the ancient philosophy, they all believed in God, right? You know what I mean? They weren't religious, but they believed in God, right? Because, I think, therefore I exist. If I think, therefore I exist, then, something maybe. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a very simple, logical way about
my mindset about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the beautiful thing about Stoicism. There is no gatekeeper, right? I don't have to go to the guy that has like the pointy hat and all the things on to tell me how I'm supposed to live my life, right? Like, you fundamentally know what's right and wrong. Right? And trust me, that's why people have remorse. That's why when you're interrogating somebody that did something bad, for the most part, they're going to kind of have some problems with it and probably spill the beans on this. They're psychopaths.
Yeah. The body language, there's tells and there's certain natural reactions, unless they're a sociopath. And then there's chemically something wrong with them. But at that point, there's more red flags than you'll be able to go to a theme park with. But what's scary to me is there are people that understand this. And what they'll do is they'll validate those emotions. Oh, you're mad? It's because of this. And it works with people that believe in supremacy. Whether it was everybody likes to talk about Nazis, but you can look at nationalism. When we look at one of the people that get it off so easy, Turkish nationalists. The amount of genocides they committed, the Assyrians, the Greeks, the Armenians, and it was all because I am better than you. You have something I want. I'm going to take it. And when we look at the original Turkic homeland, it was in central Russia. How'd they wind up basically at the Caspian Ocean? It was through dominance. And there was a lot of nationalism. I'm better than you. And there's a lot of stuff out there. And today you can see it now. And I'm not trying to be a transphobe or a homophobe, but LGBT really embodies this. If you're not with us, you're against us.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't have an opinion against it. Now there are plenty of people that would fall into that category that are now looking at it going like, okay, this isn't what I signed up for. I exist. This is who I am. But it doesn't mean just because somebody has a different opinion. Like there was a blind little thing on the street, and they were talking about, hey, this person is X, Y, and Z. And I'll cut to the chase. They were describing Amish people. And the average person that was progressive was labeling them as dangerous and that they needed to be destroyed. That's what throughout the conversation, that's what happened. Because that's all they were looking at. They didn't understand that those people live by themselves and do their own thing. But if you can justify something in front of people that all they want to do is emotion, they don't think about themselves, and they want their in-group to succeed and supersede and be a supremacy, then it's happening more and more. If you look at it, they break people down.
Well, they segregate, right? They segregate, and I think that's a lot of that goes into this. Like now we segregate now. Now you're a Democrat or Republican, right? It's like, wow, man, we used to all be Americans. That was cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but at the end of the day, like,
What a time to be alive.
What about human? Can I just be a human or what?
I forgot.
You know what I
We're
mean?
all, what's the word? Humanity, right?
Right, human. Yeah. So I think, and that says something. And then when they start breaking them down, they want to have like the fringe societies and everything else. That is a way that they can either uphold like kind of what they think is somehow better than something else, or they can use that against somebody else to try to act like they're not as virtuous because they are not part of said fringe society. I think everybody's the same at the end of the day, right?
The Gettysburg Address.
Yeah, everybody's the damn same. Like I don't give a shit. It's all about what you do with your reasoned choice is the only differentiation between anybody, right? How much merit do you have? And I think that, you know, there's a lot of other people. It's kind of funny too, because I was at the UNCW basketball game recently, right? So they had their whole like, hey, we accept everybody. And I'm like, you know, it's kind of like the VA, right? Like, when's the last time you thought about suicide? Not until you said it. You know what I mean? And you know, it's like we accept everybody's like, yeah, like we're playing freaking basketball, dude. Nobody's like out here trying to say, you know, they're better than anybody else. We're just here to like watch a game, right? We don't need to have all of this, all of this shit.
Sport, yeah.
And then right after they did all of their like, we're accepting of everybody. You know, DMX came on and he's talking about, you know, if you're whatever, you know, suck my dick or whatever else, right? And I'm just like, okay, cool. Let's put one and one together here. Where's the logic? And you just made this statement, but then you play this music that makes this statement. Right? You know what I mean? Now you're just, you know, you're contradicting yourself, and that doesn't make sense. And I think that a lot of times people try to do it out of the best intentions, but they don't obviously understand that you are now still segregating. Like you are. So either you can say that we're tribal in nature, which I understand. Like you can make that argument that we're tribal in nature and we like our own tribe or whatever else. That's fine. That's your thing, because honestly, we're not always meant to be all together like we are now. It's just civilization has progressed to the point where we are now.
Social groups in general, like long before this and all that crap, was your social group was at max supposed to be like 150 people, roughly.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
now it's
a very
freaking
small social group.
Yeah.
Now you're talking to 50,000 freaking people on Facebook and Instagram and whatever else, and like there's no like borders for the individual person with that anymore.
Yeah, I always
it just messes everything up.
Yeah, I always just talk to my like kids and the people I'm around, man. It's like you accept everybody like as they are. You know what I mean? Like you ain't changing nobody, first of all, nor should you, because the second you think that you're going to change somebody, you just somehow put yourself on a pedestal with them, right? So what's in your control and what's out of your control? You are in your control, and Stoicism is very heavily on your, you know, your perceptions, right? And they say like you should question the fuck out of your perceptions. And a lot of times I find even myself as an adult now, it's just all like, you know, I just judged that guy and I shouldn't have. You know what I mean? Like, cool, he had a neck tattoo. Like, who gives a fuck, right? He's probably a nicer human being than most other people. And then comparing, too. So this isn't very heavy on, like, don't compare yourself to other people, right? You should not. The only person that you should be comparing yourself to is you, right? Because that's ultimately the only thing that you ultimately have control over. And that's why it's such like a practical philosophy. And how much of the bullshit that people like portray or do or whatever else is just because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses and compare against somebody else. And what's scary right now is now we're getting into this weird, like, I'm more offended than you type of comparison stuff, which is just really interesting. And I don't understand how it makes you stronger. You know what I mean? Because Stoicism ultimately is about like, hey, how can you make yourself as strong as you possibly can be? Whatever that means for you is whatever that means for you. I mean, it could be, you know, physical strength, or it could just be like, man, I can read 50 books or whatever you have that makes you excellent, then go forth and do it to the best of your abilities. You know what I mean? But ideally, I don't think it's going to be into anybody's best of their abilities to be like, well, I'm the most triggered.
No,
you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense.
And that goes back to them trying to make everyone weaker so they can control.
Correct.
Exactly.
But people don't, I don't understand why people don't get it. But that's, you know, teach their own. They'll figure it out, I guess, right? Ultimately, I hope that they find Stoicism and they start kind of studying it and they realize that, you know, back in like Greece and Rome, like they didn't really give a shit, right? Like it was all based on your merit to an extent, or supposed to be. You could be born into it and have X amount of money or whatever else. But what the Stoics are talking about, Epictetus, even Seneca, who is a very rich Roman, and then of course Marcus Aurelius, man, it was all about self-reflection and you trying to be the best human being that you can be. But you have to have the agency to do so, right? And you can't blame somebody else for whatever you did.
And that's a big portion of it when you're talking about mental health, just understanding. Like, one of the coolest things I ever heard was dude was talking about a panic attack, and it was like, look, you're not going to beat a panic attack. What you're going to do is you're going to understand that it's going to pass. How you're feeling before it is how you will return to it. You can't, it's something that's out of your control. And what I see is a lot of people are their emotions are catered to. And like you were saying, people come up and they introduce themselves now in a public forum explaining all their, like, I am this, I have this disability, this, that, the other pronouns. And
They got to give a 5-minute introduction of themselves.
They do, but what it boils down to is, like, they're being hyper emotional. And when they're trying to establish their supremacy, like, one of the most annoying things I've seen lately is anytime I would raise a concern about something, whether it had to do with legality, like the law, the first thing out of most people's mouths is, you're a white man. I was like, congratulations, I'm 36 years old. I've known that for about 35 years, and looking in a mirror. And like, what you have.
Congratulations, you're not colorblind.
You have a lot of people that are very frustrated. And when it comes to mental health, understanding yourself, you remember that tenet in the Marine Corps, it was know yourself and seek self-improvement.
Right.
That's a real thing, but they gloss over that shit.
It's a Stoic
You
kind
have
of principle.
yeah, exactly. You have a
That was
lot of
instantly
people.
one of the first things that came to my mind.
Treat others like you want to be treated.
Exactly.
That is a Stoic. That is a very
Exactly.
Stoic principle, because
you
I wouldn't
have-
want to hurt you, because
The
I would expect
the
you.
golden rule that
Yeah.
they preach in school.
You have a lot of people that are frustrated, and they need conduits to vent that frustration. And if they don't understand how to do it, or they don't even understand who they are, like, one of the silliest things I've seen is people are talking about their sexual orientation. And they're like, I don't know it. Okay, then why are you imposing things on other people if you don't even know yourself? Just shut up and take a little self-reflection. And then if you have something that comes out, remotely professional, then people are going to think more of you. What blows my mind is people will go out and they'll just say some of the stupidest shit I've ever heard. And when I say stupid, it's incorrect. It's usually not logical. And a lot of it is them just following whatever somebody above them said, an influencer or a politician. And those aren't your words. Like, you can absolutely borrow things from people that are extremely intelligent, that made an impact. Buddha, Jesus, Stoics. Those are people, and there's a reason why they're famous. But we have elevated people to stardom here that are fucking stupid, and it's mainly, can they control dumb people? And I'm not
It's
saying
clickbait shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that every single person
We
is
never
stuck.
use that. We never clickbait.
I'm not saying everybody is stuck in what they are now. You have the ability to change. That's the great thing about this country and about being a human being, is understanding your faults. Like, for myself, I realized that I drank way too fucking much. I cut that shit out, and my mental health has been so much better. And, like, insurmountably. Married, we're looking at having a family, and that was me stopping and taking a hard look, not saying, I've been fucked over by society. I have TBIs from combat. Like, making those excuses, understanding that, yeah, I get pissed off really fast. But when I go up and I'm going to be stopping a person in a vehicle, I'm going to do a traffic stop. I am temporarily taking away their rights. I take a small pregnant pause, and I realize I might be dealing with somebody who's having the worst day of their fucking life. All right. And then I go into that approach in a professional manner to execute what the state has deemed authority for me to impose on them. And I don't abuse that. And there are people out there that, given that authority, that emotional, that gratitude, that feeling that they get from imposing their will on other people because they have a badge or a gun or a political office, it's wrong. But if everybody started, like, reading a little bit more, I love having this technology, but it has made us lazy. And what I've been doing lately is I've been putting these things away. I have about 7 or 8 books next to my nightstand, and I've been reading On the Social Contract. I've been reading the Voyage of the Starship Beagle, which is an amazing book. A bunch of movies came out from this book, like Alien. the movie Alien was part of this, but it had to do with society, and they're just using the vehicle for this.
That's the novel.
The novel. You look at 1984. You can another one's The Wanting Seed. The Wanting Seed is by Anthony Burgess. He did A Clockwork Orange, and it has to do with how society controls people through the bare bones fundamentals of what we do, which is eat, sleep, reproduce, and how people way up at the top have realized they can make money based upon manipulating human life. And you just, if you just read, and it's crazy. I talked to a cop yesterday, or day before yesterday. She hasn't read a book in like 4 fucking years.
It's the most bang for your buck. Reading a book is the most bang for your buck, because you have to understand that person that wrote the book probably put years of their life into that book and just writing it in general, not to say all the research that had to lead up to that. So if you really want to get to the source of things, it's the most bang for your buck. I would just argue that, especially if you're reading like fictional stuff, even if it's about, it's an overlay of what actually is happening in society in a way that it's going to make people pissed off, but it's going to kind of get your point across in a more astute way. But also read where it actually, the thought came from, right? That's always my thing. It's like, cool, that sounds good, but where did he actually get his information from? And actually try to go back to the source, which is, to an extent, a lot of the things that you'll see now after you study Stoicism a little bit is that's where that came from. It's like, I didn't even know. Right. And I read quotes now and I'm like, oh, Epictetus said that shit. You know what I mean? And then obviously it kind of got morphed into how we have it today, 2,000 years later. Right. But you never even knew where the actual start came from. And if you don't know where you started from, you're not going to really know where you're going.
I had a little brain melting session the other day because I was studying up and getting prepared for the podcast. And I was talking with Sarah about something when we were jumping. And Nakarado came onto my mind, and a little bit about his background, what he used to be as a human being when he became a team chief, and he was your team chief. And watching, he had such a finite view politically and racially, and then completely changed. And the way that he acted as a team chief blew all the other team chiefs away. It did. He did embody a lot of stoic thought. He was never like, fuck that shit, we're doing it this way. Like, you need that guy on the X every now and then for an IAD, for an immediate action drill. But when we're talking about planning, when we're talking about actually using your personnel and having Nakarado's thought process on stuff, I don't know what he's doing now. I didn't keep up with a lot of people. But when I was younger, I was frustrated, borderline alcoholic, just very violent. And I just remember he was always cool, calm, collective, and he would take a pregnant pause before he talked, and he was really good about you can speak more to him, but it was, now looking back on it, I was like, holy shit, he had it figured out. He didn't get fucking stressed out. He didn't get fucking mad. Maybe he did and I didn't see it, but the way that he approached different things was, now looking back at it, very instrumental. I had a lot of team chiefs that were very reactive. I had team chiefs that were fucking dumb. And like, I understood whatever they fucked up and failed at, I wound up having to pick up that slack. But one of the things, it came up the other day, and I was just thinking for myself for like about 15 minutes. I was like, holy shit. Like, all these things I'm realizing now is stuff he was doing. And all I did at that point was just be a drunk asshole running around talking shit. That's literally, and I feel bad now. I kind of like, almost feel like I should call him up and be like, yo, dude, I'm sorry I was such an asshole at that point in my life. But again, if you don't know yourself, you can't seek self-improvement. All you are is an emotional mess that's going to cause problems for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just to kind of quote Epictetus, right? And this is just about like kind of perception. And you have the self-reflectiveness of actually having the perception. So he says, remember that foul words or blows that in them themselves are no outrage, but the judgment they are so. So when anyone makes you angry, knows that your own thoughts that has angered you, right? Whenever, therefore, make it your endeavor not to let your impressions carry you away. For it is once you gain time and delay, you will find it easier to control yourself. So he's talking about, the fact that, your interpretation of how you kind of see things is so often wrong. right? And I do this shit all the time, right? And my problem is perfectionism, right? So then I want to judge, and then if I judge, I compare, and then I have to just be like, stop, you're being a fucking perfectionist, right? Because now I have to take that pregnant pause, take that like step, and that like kind of like second to actually think about my thoughts, and then you can actually remain objective, right? And that's what people don't do that anymore. And it's not bad. And it's not going to be like, you're never going to be like, cool, I'm about to objectify you. Right? You know what I mean? Like, you're going to take a second. You're going to be like, no, man, that just doesn't, it's not logical anymore. Or you're just going to actually shut the fuck up and listen, which is something else Epictetus always talked to, right? A lot of people don't understand where the actual saying come from. But he's like, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Yep. Essentially, right? He didn't say it like that, but that's pretty much what he's talking about, right? So a lot of times you can actually just be quiet and listen, and you can hear so much more. You just don't have to fill the room anymore.
Exactly.
So it's pretty interesting.
Perception and perspective. I remember somebody was talking about the two differences. Everybody has perception of the world around them, but perspective, seeing it from other people's points of view. That was just an interesting take. You talked a little bit about how you have your kids read a little bit about this. What was your, we'll say, transcendental moment when you realized, like, when you made that conscious switch between being just a person walking around in society to realizing, hey, this can make me a better person? Was there an aha moment for you? What was it?
Yeah, I had a self-reflective moment. I told myself I was pretty much failing my family to an extent, right? I had all of this knowledge in my head, and I wasn't teaching them. And I had to have this self-reflective moment that I would teach somebody on my team. I would teach one of my subordinates. Why the fuck am I not teaching my family, right? You know what I mean? So I would develop my subordinates and everything else, but for some reason, like, I thought that like my kids were supposed to figure it out on their own or something. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, it took me like an aha moment. Like, it's like, I'm just being lazy. Like, I can do better, right?
I feel like that's honestly a common thing, because it was same story.
Yeah, I can do better, right? And that's ultimately like when I was like, no, like, my daughter needs to read more. Boom, she's reading this, and this is actually like, I think this is very truthful in nature. And then we have a discussion about it, and then like I can apply this stuff throughout. So honestly, the aha moment is when I actually started studying this, and I actually started applying it, and I actually started holding myself more accountable. Because it's really easy to try to hold somebody else accountable. It's really hard to hold yourself accountable.
Another question. Happiness. A lot of people think certain things make them happy, whether it's money, it's power, it's control. What makes you happy?
I think I like achieving things, right? But I also like being disciplined, right? Mm-hmm. Being disciplined Absolutely. Makes me happy. It's really weird because it's almost like a negative feedback loop for me, because I'm just a negative feedback loop type of person. It's just how I'm built, and that's fine. But yeah, to me, it's like when I know that I was disciplined this whole week and I accomplished the things that needed to be accomplished, but I still actually took, just those little seconds. That's all you kind of get, where you're just all like, man, dude, my daughter's growing up. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, my wife looks really pretty today. You know what I mean? And like, you just take those like just split seconds when you're like not focused on what happens next, and you actually just get to live in the now a little bit. It doesn't happen all the time, but that's kind of how I know I'm at least on somewhat of the right path, but I'm still figuring it the fuck out, right? You know what I mean? Yeah.
In today's world, there's a lot of negativity. It seems like there's more negative stuff out there. People are always bringing attention to this cause, that cause. Mm-hmm. Everything's so negative. What's one thing do you have like a certain mantra or something, when something gets to the point where you're like, okay, this is physically affecting my emotional health? Is there anything that you do or say to yourself in order to kind of quell that negativity? Mm-hmm. For me, like, I have people constantly, they're so fucking negative. And I literally walk out of the room and I think to myself, they don't know any better, don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence. And then I attempt to redirect them. But what's a tip or a tool that you would have dealing with a negative person?
That's actually a really good. I got something on that.
Yeah. So when I deal with a negative person, it's listening, right? It's listening, and then what I generally do is I talk about something positive, right? And then especially if somebody's being negative and you're living in the United States of America, and you can go pick out fucking 20 different types of soda pop if you want to, right? That's like one of those very small things. Or you can pick out my most disgusting kind of thought that I've ever had, and it's just dealing with Stoicism too, because it could always be worse, right? A bot fly infection, right? Actually having,
God, I haven't thought about that
right,
in a while.
right. So you think your life's hard? Like, hey, take a look at this picture. Life's not that hard. You know what I mean? Or like freaking just think about something like that and be able to actually put yourself in some shoes like that, right? Like, hey, like, like we have 20 different types of cereal that you can choose. So what are you really complaining about? And then you can always be like, so what are you doing about it?
Exactly.
What are you going? Are you going to
I
run?
get that a
When, or like,
lot.
when are you running?
Yeah,
You know what I'm
exactly.
saying?
Like-
wait, did you vote?
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't vote.
But
you
you're gonna bitch and
you
complain
didn't
about
vote,
it.
but you want to bitch. You know what I mean?
Be the change in the world you want
Yeah.
to see.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yep.
Recently, and I'm not calling anybody out here, but I've had a kind of a string of people messaging me, like guys or gals that I used to serve with and stuff, and like life just isn't hitting them right, right now, right? And they hear about the stuff that I'm doing, they see where the path that I'm trying to go on and all that stuff. So they reach out and they're like, life fucking sucks right now, like this and this and this is happening, like it's never gonna get better. And like I sit there and I let them rant, I listen to them, and then I do the same thing. I try to throw out something positive first of all to like
It's like your first salvo.
Yep.
Yeah, try
take the
to
attention
change it.
and-
You know what I mean?
and that's
Because that's
almost-
something that's in your control that you can do.
Exactly.
Ultimately, I can be positive. I can be a positive example. Yep.
And also take yourself out of take yourself away from negative people too.
Right.
You can always try to help them out, but you can only do that so much because they have to help themselves.
Correct.
So that's usually my biggest piece of advice to the people that do that is take yourself away from the negative people that are putting this on you and start thinking positive. Put yourself in a positive mindset. Go to the fucking gym. Go find your niche, the thing that's going to take your mind off
Do
of
something.
stuff, and try to live a happier, more positive life. And things will kind of just start, when you do that, they kind of just start falling into place. If you just stay negative all the time, the negative things are going to keep happening to you. And it sounds stupid.
No,
and
it's true.
it sounds cliche and trivial, but you think negative shit all the time, then that's what you're going to get. You get what you put in.
Correct.
Thoreau stated the purpose of life is a life of purpose. If you don't have, if there's nothing you're going to work for, you don't have a goal and you don't have that effort to achieve that goal, you're basically floating. You're living in a negative, like physically in a negative space. And that's when all these emotions creep into your head. It's usually the loudest people that have very terrible things to say are people that aren't doing anything, honestly. Like they are finding something, conflict, in order to validate themselves, in order to make themselves relevant by tearing other people down, whether it's appearance-based, faith-based, what have you. And to me, like that is one of the hardest things because I don't interact with people daily that are doing the right thing or being nice. It's usually the opposite. And I found that like the mental health that's in this area for that, there's no non-for-profits. Like you see firefighters that have to deal with a person that just got or EMT watches somebody that just got ran over by a car. Firefighter had to pull a girl out that got burnt to a crisp. She's dead. You've got grieving people all around. You have a cop that just wound up making a bust and the DA lets them go. Like there's so much terrible things and we don't have the support network here. So one of the things that I've been looking at is trying to change that in this area. And we have a lot of resources in SOF. We have a lot of resources in the military now.
I would say just as a normal veteran.
But look around in this area. There's nothing for first responders. Now the cities have mandated stuff for mental health after you shoot somebody, but there's nothing prior to that. They have this system in place that's supposed to prevent it. It never fucking does, because the people that are written it are not in that field. So my thing going forward, probably in the next several years, is trying to develop a mental health 501(c) for this area for, fire, EMS, police, corrections. God bless the corrections officers. They had
I've
heard some.
I was a jailer for like 2.5 years when I was going through college, and it was interesting. But I would argue though, to an extent, as far as like the mental health aspect is, so many people won't take 10 minutes out of their morning to actually figure out what winning is for the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? So like
Pick a small goal.
figure whatever winning for you is that day, and just take a second, like, don't have the TV on, don't be on your phone or whatever else. Take 10 minutes, just breathe and figure out what winning is that day. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed. You know what I mean? Or you went to the gym that day or whatever else. Hey, you told your wife she was pretty this morning.
That's
Check.
winning for me.
Win. You know what I mean? Figure out what winning is for you that day. But people don't ever think about that because they want to fixate on the negative. They want to be like, oh, well, I have these problems. It's like, what does it then mean to not have those problems? Then figure out what winning looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't figure out what winning looks like and you have some sort of a plan to get to X, then what do you do it? You know what I mean? And figure out what that plan is. It can be small, but you should try to wake up winning, right? That's the whole concept of making your bed in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why do you make your bed in the morning? So that you win. You woke up and you accomplished something. And then you should be proud of your
And
accomplishment,
that sets
right?
the tone for your day.
Well,
It sets the whole tone for your whole day.
Controlling the variables and stimulus too. Remember, one of the funnier things when we were in SEER school was small victories, little victories. But we were in a microcosm, so you didn't have. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have anything else other than the guys I was with. And the little victory was fucking rich. It was just that one thing. And if people can kind of compartmentalize and prioritize what's going on, there's a lot of people that are always on their phone. And I think it's bad for mental health.
Oh, yeah, dude.
It's atrocious.
And watching how people can get out of their car and walk or stand or work out or read something. Every day I try to read. Every day I try to get physical activity. With walking around, I do foot patrols. One of the few guys that does a foot patrol. And there was a call out on this vehicle, and they're like, oh, I think this vehicle was all involved in a hit and run. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I was like, if you had gotten out of your fucking car in the last 6 months, you know that vehicle has been here. This hit and run occurred a couple weeks ago. You would know that vehicle from it because it's damaged, has been there for almost a year. But you don't. You sit in your car and you play on your fucking phone.
Yeah,
And
the
then you
amount
come-
of times
well, and
just
they-
coming back from Carolina Beach.
And then you come back, and then it's really difficult to try and when people feed off each other in a negative area. And the best thing that I found is individually getting people and trying to talk to them alone to try and I wouldn't say tailor their behavior, but trying to make it positive. So you have a shit job. You're trying to make other people happy. As if you're not happy, you don't understand yourself, how are you expected to do that for other people, especially if you're in a leadership position.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because then you're just wreaking toxic negativity down to your subordinates.
Absolutely.
All the way through.
And then develop heuristics, man. Develop your own heuristics, which is just self-reflection, right? So like I know, like if my phone is work to me now, right? That's how I make money. Like I make money by communicating. I'm a conduit. I'm on the phone. It's work, right? So I'm constantly on the phone. 8 o'clock, my phone gets put on the charger and it gets left downstairs. Because that's now my time to be either A, by myself or B, with my family and try to actually focus on something other than my damn phone. But you have to develop that heuristic and know enough about yourself to do so. You know what I mean? But if you don't, you just get caught up in this kind of constant like draw on your attention all the time and you don't have any time for self-reflection. So that's, I mean, people just need to take...
this morning instead of last
Yeah.
night about that.
Yeah. And people just need to take the second to just, especially in the morning, right? And like it's something with Stoicism as well, right? Your morning routine. It's very important, right? Humans are routine-based things. Like that's how we got to be where we're at today because we like routine. It works. Figure out what your routine is in the morning and stay to it. Have the discipline to do so. I mean, my routine, I wake up at 4:45. I actually roll out of bed at 5. I have like one of the lighted clocks, which actually helps out quite a bit because it actually stops producing melatonin. It's actually really good for you and wakes you the hell up. I go downstairs and I meditate, and then after I meditate, I read something, and then after that I go work out, and then after that I usually come back, do some sort of like a breathing type of exercise, and I start my day. You know what I mean? After I walk my dog in the woods.
I have a funny story to share with you guys. So this thing, it got screwed up, and I wound up buying parts and fixing it myself. And
I saw the picture.
You did?
Yeah, I didn't know it was your phone.
My dumbass inadvertently, the speaker doesn't work on this for coming out the bottom. I can answer and listen to the top speaker.
But can you talk into it?
I can talk into it. The microphone's fine, but the bottom
the
speaker is fucked. So one of the most funny things is now I have to basically take this thing apart. I bought a new speaker, but I found that since it doesn't have a fucking speaker, I don't use it near as much. It's ridiculous. The only problem is I don't have an alarm clock. I have to use my iPad as my alarm clock, but it's hilarious because I didn't realize my phone was dying all the time. I had to either put it up in the car or I had to charge it next to the computer. And I remember the last several weeks at work, this thing has been in my pocket and, I check it when I have time. It doesn't inadvertently stop me from accomplishing tasks because I'm not getting distracted. I'm not watching videos. It was one of the funniest fuck-ups that I've had that wound up being a big positive. And right now, I'm actually considering I still have to replace the home button.
That way?
Yeah, leaving it that way. It's so weird. It's weird to me. And that you brought this up, and I was like, yo, fucking light bulb.
See, I would say that would be a thing for me. Like, I listen to music and stuff on my phone, but when I'm doing that, I've got AirPods in or whatever, so it's like it doesn't really matter. So.
Yeah. When was the last time you actually consciously cut something out? Like consciously cut something out of your life?
I did coffee this year. Last year was alcohol.
For a whole year?
For
you you're cutting it out.
I'm cutting coffee.
So it's not even fasting. You're just straight up like I'm done.
I'm cutting out coffee. The next thing is going to be these things. I'll still drink tea. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to slowly go in and look. There's a lot of we can have an entire podcast episode on biohacking and nutrition. And I've noticed that since I have started eating differently, and I'm not trying to say this makes me a better person. I found physically I don't hurt as much. My injuries and stuff from changing how I eat, the sources of my food, to also how I've changed what I put on my body. So I've gotten rid of antiperspirants. I use a magnesium-based deodorant. I wound up getting rid of all these shampoos. I don't have much to wash anyway. But I started looking. I was like, bro, people are concerned about smoking. Mm-hmm. Well, the amount of stuff you're putting into your body in small portions that will eventually build up to lethal portions. And I'm looking at a lot of friends and family that are dying from liver failure, and they're not alcoholics because your kidneys and your liver process everything. The food that we're putting into us literally degrades your cognitive abilities. One of the things I really have been getting into in the last year or two was nootropics, and how using nootropics similar to how you would a pre-workout. And it's just really interesting, but the way fats work, how glycogen and glycol work, how your hormones work, and realizing if shit's out of whack, you're in you ever heard pregnancy brain? Mm-hmm. A girl's I've got pregnancy brain. Yeah, it's a real fucking thing. I was looking up the folic acid and folate, the difference between. But legally, they can call them the same thing, but they're not. Folic acid is a processed chemical that mimics folate. It's B9 or B12. Folate you need to have as a woman, especially if you're pregnant. It's a must. But our government started saying you can put folic acid, which is this really long chemical, and it mimics it. But the problem is most women have genes that prevent them from being able to methylate that folic acid, and it builds up inside of them, and it's toxic, and it causes problems with cognitive abilities. So there's a real thing out there. I always fuck with my wife. I always go you're crazy. You need to calm down. I always do that. I just like to, we mess with each other. But looking at, when she was on birth control and the diet that she was eating at the time, and there were just she's a very rational person. She doesn't curse. She doesn't drink. Seeing the differences then and now in behavior is fascinating. And then being you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be shoving Oreos in my mouth or chugging alcohol, and making those small changes that accumulatively build up it's great. I haven't had arthritis like I've had horrible arthritis in my back, my knees, my ankles, everything fucking hurts. And I'm instead of popping a pill to get rid of that, I'm just going to slowly change my diet, and it's working out in a tremendous factor. Now, do I have it down to a science? No. Sometimes I'll I'll eat something, and the next thing I know, I'm on the shitter for like an hour. But I'm slowly starting to lead a healthier life, and one of that thing is food. I think that's something we can bring up in another podcast.
That's a huge part of it.
You're a very healthy person. You were healthy when you were in the teams. I ate ramen and then, God, ramen and basically pussy and alcohol. And that was it. And like, no wonder my brain and ass. And no wonder my fucking brain was pickled. No wonder I was running around angry all the time.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I asked is cutting out just something, right? It gets into kind of stoicism as a stoic practice as well, so that you actually see if you actually need that or not. And most people will never. They just add. You're just constantly adding more and more and more shit, right? And I think it was Seneca would say that if you want to make a man happier, make him not want more but want less. Right? It's ultimately like you have so much shit as it is right now.
Living more of a minimalistic lifestyle.
Yeah, to an extent, right? So, we always fast, like the start of the year, we always, cut out, we do the dry January thing you need to do that, right? Or just cut it out, like you said, right?
Which that's kind of how that started for you anyways.
It started because my wife was going to fucking leave me.
Very well. Did not know that.
Self-reflection.
You haven't met drunk asshole Lobo.
He was interesting.
I was an asshole. I was a fucking psychopath.
From a fly on the wall.
No, it was bad.
Standpoint.
It was really bad.
Yeah, but I would just argue that, at least for your listeners or whatever else, man, like just pick something that you think you like and just see if you can, how long you can go without it. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's pretty interesting. Like this, I always cut out, booze and then meat. So I pretty much go meatless for a whole month, and you just kind of see how you are and see if he makes it better or worse, right? And it's just ultimately that whole self-reflectiveness of it is like, like treat yourself like a fucking science experiment, right? Yeah. And you should. You're like, oh wait, that didn't work. You know what I mean? Or like, hey, that's actually made me feel really great.
You have a hypothesis, and you're doing different inputs to see what happens. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is, and you got to ultimately see what kind of works for you. But yeah, man, I think people should try it, and people should just seek knowledge.
What do you have coming up? We ended the last time you were here with things that you have coming up. What do you have coming up as far as in this year?
Yeah. So February 8th, we have our VBC Mardi Gras celebration. That's going to be at the Eagles Dare from 17 to 1900, 5 to 7. Anybody's welcome to come to that. If you're a veteran thinking about starting a business, you're a veteran that's in business, please come out. Check us out. Ultimately, our power is our membership. So the more members we have, the better we are going to be and the better that we can serve one another. And then on February 9th at Freya's house, we're going to do like a celebrity bartending thing. We're going to be raffling off an outboard motor that was donated to us by Tideline Marine in order to raise money for the Raider Realty Foundation, whose mission that we already kind of talked about as far as, helping with a Gold Star or White Star member family in the area. And a lot of people don't understand that. Everybody knows what a Gold Star is, but they don't know what a White Star is. And what a White Star is ultimately, a victim of suicide as far as, the widow and the actual dependent child,
the family that's
behind. which ultimately, like, we're going to show that the community still stands with you and we can still help you because it's the right thing to do.
I'm 100% behind that.
Yeah,
you both have heard my stories with that.
Yep.
Well, with that, it was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, man.
As always.
Yeah.
Hunter.
What?
I want you to take us out this time.
I'm taking you guys out.
I want you to take the episode out this time.
Okay. I don't know what to say.
Just be Hunter.
Right time, right place, right uniform. Don't be a dick. That's pretty much it. I don't know. I gotta wake up. No, I'm off tomorrow. Dude, I forgot my birthday. My wife had to remind me. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, if it's stupid and it works,
it's not stupid.
All right, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.
What happened to peace in the Middle East?
Oh yeah, peace in the Middle East. We'd be out of a job.
We'd be out of a job.